This could be the beginning of the end for Dr. Anthony Fauci, as a new report says the White House is looking to remove Anthony Fauci, per a White House official. Now, this comes only about a week or so after Republicans were demanding Fauci be fired because of his backtracking, his flip-flopping, and what many people said were lies. Republicans were pushing something called I think it was the FIRED Act, which stood for Fauci incompetence requires early dismissal or something like that. I don't know. It was very clever. Pat yourselves on the back. It was very clever. But now, amid the email scandal, we're learning that Fauci has been lying to the public. He knew about the possibility of lab leak. Experts had said it appeared certain parts of COVID were engineered. And Fauci has been flip-flopping back and forth. In fact, it's been so bad that Rand Paul is taking a victory lap saying Fauci lied. Fauci committed perjury. Tucker Carlson is now asking whether or not Fauci is under a criminal investigation for having lied under oath about this. I decided to look back at some of these archives in response to Fauci appearing on CNN and doing damage control, saying things like, I have an open mind about lab leak theory, but I do think it was a zoonotic transfer, meaning the COVID originated from bats, jumped to humans, and that's where it started. So I'd looked back at some of the things that Anthony Fauci had said, and it would appear that no, he was fairly definitive in his statements. There's no evidence. It's not the case, but now he has an open mind. I don't believe him for a second. Anthony Fauci admitted he provided funding to EcoHealth Alliance, who then provided funding to the Wuhan lab. I'm not saying Anthony Fauci is directly responsible, but there is some indirect responsibility having provided some of this funding. And it would seem Fauci is worried about that coming back to haunt him. And that may be the motivation for why he lied to the American people and to Rand Paul. Now, it's not just his firing. Reports came out that Anthony Fauci would have a book coming out. Obviously, a lot of people laughed at the idea of Fauci coming out with a book about the truth and the COVID and all that stuff when he was flip-flopping back and forth and providing very awful advice to people. Now the book has been pulled. Apparently, it's not happening. They're saying it was a preliminary release. It shouldn't happen. Some are suggesting the White House said, you can't do this. You can't put out this book. And I think perhaps that may be the case. While the official reporting may be that the book was prematurely announced. Maybe. Could it also be that the White House is seeking to remove Fauci and there are specific rules about what he can and can't say in a book, and they have to review it? So maybe Fauci is just on the way out, which would be a good thing for everybody, in my opinion. Look, I know a lot of Democrats love the guy, but he has been giving inconsistent advice and he flip-flops every other day. It's like he just says whatever he thinks he has to say. Like when he said, I remember he was asked in the interview, shouldn't people wear 2 masks? And he goes, it's just common sense to wear 2 masks. Then he came out a few days later. There's nothing saying to wear 2 masks. And then he came out like a week later. CDC says wear 2 masks. It was nonsense. It was shattering people's faith in the system. Maybe it's about time we get somebody else. And it seems like Republicans may be getting their wish because he's about to be on the way out. Let's read this news and go through what's going on right now with the email leak and why Fauci may be about to get fired. However, before we get started, head over to timcast.com and become a member to get access to our members only area. When you sign up to become a member at timcast.com, you're helping support our work in the event that we get suspended or shut down. And the purge is real. They've banned a lot of people. Signing up helps and you get access to our members only segments, which are exclusive to our members. But don't forget, we don't have the ability to compete with the marketing department of CNN or Fox News or MSNBC. So if you really think I do a good job, you like what I have to say, sharing this video allows me to compete with these big conglomerates. Maybe you don't think I'm the best personality on YouTube or talking about news, but if you think that CNN should not be getting hundreds of millions of views, and I should, share this video, help support my work. Let's read the story first from Inquisitor. Joe Biden administration is looking to remove Anthony Fauci after email release, reporter says. Inquisitor says conservative reporter and One America News Network anchor Jack Posobiec claimed on Wednesday morning that Joe Biden's administration is looking to get rid of Anthony Fauci, a key member of the White House coronavirus task force, after his emails were released to the public. Quote, White House staff are actively discussing an exit strategy for Dr. Anthony Fauci following the release of his emails yesterday, per White House official. Fauci's emails were released via the Freedom of Information Act and revealed interactions he had with officials about the possible laboratory origins of coronavirus, among other things. Now we'll break this down. Editorialization and framing is always a major component in reporting any news, so I'll tell you my thought process. An exit strategy. Typically, that's a polite way of saying they're getting rid of you. You're being fired. Sometimes you'll hear they've asked for their resignation. Oh, come on. We know what it means. It's just a PR way of saying we're firing you. Anthony Fauci is embroiled in a scandal. It is rocking faith in the institutions and those who are supposed to be leading us through this conflict, this crisis. And so they probably want to find a way for Anthony Fauci to leave to lower the heat a little bit. So does that mean they're going to come out and say we have fired Anthony Fauci? Probably not. They're not going to give Republicans the win. But it may be that they come out and say, Fauci decided to go and focus on this book and he'll be leaving the administration, blah, blah, blah. That seems likely. Assuming this report is true, but Jack Posobiec has had some pretty big scoops in the past, and I think it's fairly obvious he's a large personality who knows people who are working in the White House. Seems extremely plausible considering what's going on. Inquisitor says the emails show Fauci's contradictory statements. As reported by Breitbart, the emails show that Fauci's public statements sometimes conflicted with the behind-the-scenes reality. Quote, for example, emails show Fauci scrambled in February 1st to determine if the United States had any potential role in funding coronavirus research abroad, after he denied the United States had funded research in China, the outlet noted. Breitbart also noted that Fauci pushed back against mask wearing while speaking to Sylvia Burwell, president of American University and former U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary. Fauci later clarified that his pushback was to preserve masks for healthcare workers, the Hill reported. But critics slammed him for not being forthright with the public. Now, Fauci said he was telling people not to wear masks if you weren't sick. He said that once they realized asymptomatic individuals could spread, that's when they started advising people to wear masks. But a large component was making sure that medical professionals had those masks. Now, some of this criticism, I think, is a little bit unwarranted because Fauci's initial position was not to wear masks. He changed his opinion later. In this email that went out, he maintained that position well into March on 60 Minutes, except something really interesting. He stated in that email that the masks can't do anything to stop the virus, which is too small. Okay, then what made him think, and seriously, that somebody who was sick wouldn't transmit the virus? Perhaps because it would limit the spitting and the droplets, as he so described it, but it doesn't seem that they'd be all that effective anyway. Regardless, Anthony Fauci has flip-flopped way too many times. And what he stated is, doing the CNN interview where he's trying to defend himself, he said, as the science updates, we give advice based on the science. Perhaps we should have just erred on the side of caution. When a bunch of people were going out and buying masks, maybe he should have just said, get some masks. That's it. In fact, I understand he wanted to make sure medical professionals needed masks. Maybe he should have just said, wear a scarf. Just take a cloth and wrap it over your face. It'll help. He didn't. He said people should not be walking around with masks. Imagine how many lives could have been saved if he didn't do that. Well, I want to take a look at some of the things he said and then show you the current criticisms and what's happening politically. First, we have this from Deadline. Dr. Anthony Fauci book scrubbed from Amazon, Barnes & Noble after premature posts. Really premature posts. Last night they reported this. Could it be there's a very serious controversy, scandal bubbling up, and they're trying to reduce the heat? Fauci is being slammed across the board over these emails. The last thing the White House needs is for a book to come out. What is it called? Expect the Unexpected. 10 Lessons on Truth, Service, and the Way Forward. Expected to be released by National Geographic Books on November 2nd. At this time, when people are saying Fauci lied and people died, people are questioning whether he lied under oath, I think the last thing the White House needs is a book about truth, which will increase the heat, increase the pressure, increase the press. Now, I don't know exactly what happened. Here's what they report. Amazon and Barnes & Noble have apparently taken down a new book by Dr. Fauci. They say Fauci's 80-page book, Expect the Unexpected. 10 Lessons on Truth, Service, and the Way Forward, is expected to be released by National Geographic Books on November 2nd. On Tuesday, the book was posted for pre-sale online at $18 on both websites. The posts were then removed. National Geographic Books confirmed the removal to dailymail.com. which reported that the book sale had been posted accidentally and prematurely. Quote, the book was developed by National Geographic Books in connection with an upcoming National Geographic documentary film about Dr. Fauci. He will not earn any royalties from its publication. The book features interviews that Fauci had conducted during his 34 years as director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. The overview states, the earnest reflections in these pages will offer a universal message on how to lead in times of crisis and find resilience in the face of disappointments and obstacles. Meanwhile, Fauci is under fire as emails published by the Washington Post appear to contradict some of his public stances on face masks and other pandemic issues. Why? How about I show you what those are? First, June 3rd, Business Insider, syndicated by Yahoo News, quote, we need to keep an open mind about the lab leak theory of the coronavirus pandemic's origins. How honorable, Dr. Fauci. Now that the media landscape is shifting and lab leak hypothesis has become more prominent and many people believe it may be the actual source of COVID, Fauci comes out and says, let's keep an open mind. Now, recently, Fauci said he was not convinced that this originated in naturally. But let's read, and I'll walk you back in time. This is Business Insider reports. Dr. Fauci said Thursday that scientists and researchers should keep an open mind about the speculative theory that the coronavirus pandemic was caused by an accident at a Chinese lab, though he reiterated that it was more likely the virus that causes COVID was spread from animal to person. Fauci, the director of the NIAID, spoke on Morning Joe on Thursday. He also spoke on CNN. In some emails from April 2020, he and the Institute's director, the National Institute of Health's director, Francis Collins, discussed the theory that the coronavirus might have first started spreading from a laboratory in China. Quote, the situation is that we didn't know, and we still don't know what the origin is, Fauci told Morning Joe, after he was asked whether he believed that the lab leak theory was a conspiracy theory. How would you like to see a big, bold lie from Anthony Fauci? I bring you back, my friends. National Geographic, May 4th, 2020. Fauci, no scientific evidence the coronavirus was made in a Chinese lab. In an exclusive interview, the face of America's COVID-19 response cautions against the rush for states to reopen and offers his tips for handling the pandemic's information deluge. No scientific evidence. Quote, if you look at the evolution of the virus in bats and what's out there now, the scientific evidence is very, very strongly leaning towards this could not have been artificially or deliberately manipulated. Everything about the stepwise evolution over time strongly indicates the virus evolved in nature and then jumped species. Fauci says, based on the scientific evidence, he also doesn't entertain an alternate theory that someone found the coronavirus in the wild, brought it to a lab, and then it accidentally escaped. He didn't even entertain that theory. Now he's coming out and saying, we should have an open mind. So you ask me, Tim, sure. But where is the lie, right? No scientific evidence, huh? On January 31st, an email response to Dr. Fauci revealed in the FauciLeaks shows that he had contacted virologists who said, if you look closely, it looks engineered. And they're going to name people that so-and-so, person, and person all think that this is not within our expectations of evolutionary theory. So there was evidence. There was scientific evidence. Now, is this National Geographic putting words in Fauci's mouth? Perhaps. Perhaps all he really said was that it leans very strongly towards zoonotic, and they put words in his mouth. I think that's fair. I blame the media most of the time. He comes out now, though, regardless, when he said he doesn't entertain an alternate theory. He doesn't. Amazing. Now he's like, oh, now we have to, investigate. Here's May 5th, 2020. Anthony Fauci just crushed Donald Trump's theory on the origins of the coronavirus. Pointing out the same quote, this was the narrative that emerged in the mainstream press. No scientific evidence of a lab leak. But maybe I'm missing something. Let me explain to you how the fact checks work. A Chinese lab. Oh, that explains it. While there was certainly evidence the coronavirus was made or engineered in some location, and evidence is not definitive proof, nothing suggested it was Chinese. You see how they do these fact checks? I warn you about this, right? you'll get a story. And for I know the diehard fans have heard this, but not everybody watches every video. There will be a video of Donald Trump doing a backflip, and everyone will be clamoring about how amazing the backflip was. And then you'll get a fact-checking organization like Snopes or something saying, did Donald Trump do a backflip while eating ice cream? False. And then everyone says, oh yeah, Donald Trump did it. It was a false story. It was fake news. It said he didn't do a backflip. No. It said he didn't do a backflip while eating ice cream. And then it'll say, false, Donald Trump did not do a backflip, while eating ice cream. And at the end of the article, it'll say, well, he did do a backflip. That's how they play games and manipulate. No scientific evidence the coronavirus was made in a Chinese lab. Yes, the email said possibly engineered, not in line with their expectations of evolution. That's scientists saying upon review, there is evidence to suggest it was engineered, made in a lab. But you look at the virus, you don't see like the CCP engraved in it somewhere. So no evidence it was a Chinese lab. That's the name of the game. That's how they manipulate. Fauci not convinced COVID-19 developed naturally. That's weird. I thought there was no scientific evidence, so saith National Geographic. Now he's not convinced. Now he wants to have an open mind. Yeah. The emails got leaked. Fauci lied. People died. Now he has an open mind. Rand Paul, quote, he told me it wasn't gain of function, but admitted in these emails. Rand Paul says Fauci lied to him over U.S.-funded research that was being carried out in the Wuhan lab and demands he is fired. Paul appeared on the Ingram Angle, where he claimed revealed emails proved Fauci may have been in part responsible for the development of COVID-19. The junior senator from Kentucky said Fauci bears moral culpability. Paul asserted COVID-19 was created by the Wuhan Institute of Virology through the National Institute of Health funding, a theory which has not been proven. Fauci told him at a hearing that last month, the NIH has not ever and does not now fund gain-of-function research in the Wuhan Institute. It's brilliant. It's how they get you. No. They did provide funding to EcoHealth Alliance, who did provide the funding to Wuhan for gain-of-function research. It was Dr. Fauci who wrote, I think in like 2011, that doing this gain-of-function research was worth it even if it sparked a pandemic. Gain-of-function research is when they take a virus and they try and make the virus more potent or more deadly so they can research and try and figure out how to combat it should it emerge in the wild. It makes sense. And a lot of conservatives are like, it was reckless and irresponsible. And I'm like, well, hold on, man. It makes sense. We're researching different kinds of viruses, how they interact with us, and we want to understand them to the best of our abilities. It makes sense. The problem is when there is a leak, when there is a Wuhan lab that's not doing its job properly, you don't come out and lie about it. You say this may be a very real possibility. In fact, if Fauci came out immediately and told the truth, some scientists have said to me it may be engineered. We must keep an open mind and take this lab leak theory very seriously because this virus may be worse than we realize. Maybe people would have taken it more seriously. Instead, he didn't. He told people to go on cruises. He said it wasn't going to be a big deal. He said, don't wear masks. Awful advice from the get-go. They want to say Paul claimed Fauci's emails show he was worried the NIH funded gain-of-function research. In his email, in the subject line, he says, gain-of-function research. He was admitting it to his private underlings 7 to 8 months ago. Fauci appeared in an interview with the Donlin Report in which he defended a grant the U.S. has provided to the Wuhan lab. Fauci also admitted he can't guarantee everything that is going on in the lab. He has denied the NIH directly funded gain-of-function research in Wuhan. No, it was indirect, but we get the point. Fauci, who was considered America's top expert on infectious disease, also explained why scientists focus their theories on the natural transmission. Fauci sent an email. He was clearly worried that this was the result of gain-of-function research and potentially from them. And now Fauci's coming out doing damage control. He lied. Well, here's Mark Meadows. Dr. Fauci didn't share his concerns. Mark Meadows says Fauci should be brought back before Senate committee to reveal why he didn't tell Coronavirus Task Force about fears that virus may have been engineered. Fauci lied. Don't you get it? He was reaching out to his own people. Was this gain of function? Clearly worried it was. That should have been immediately turned over to the American people so we could have dealt with this. We could have taken it more seriously. Fauci had evidence from some doctors that said it may be the case. Now, maybe things changed, but he did have some evidence. Instead, he said, no, it's zoonotic. Maybe that was just Fauci's bias. He didn't want to accept reality. Why? Because it implicated him. Daily Mail reports on Wednesday more than 3,000 emails were leaked to Fauci's. They say the emails include one Fauci sent in January to two other scientists. One scientist responded saying it was possible COVID-19 was engineered. Fauci at the time was publicly dismissive of the idea the virus was man-made. The lab leak theory promoted by Trump and Pompeo is now gaining ground. On Wednesday night, Trump's chief of staff called for a hearing in Congress. Fauci's critics accuse him of deliberately downplaying the lab leak suggestion. Fauci on Wednesday evening said many of his emails were being misinterpreted. Misinterpreted. Tucker Carlson with an op-ed for Fox News. Is Dr. Fauci under criminal investigation? We can only hope he is. Tucker writes, the utter fraudulence of Tony Fauci is obvious now and is widely acknowledged. But it was not always so obvious. In March of last year, we interviewed Fauci on this show. We treated him with respect. We took his answers seriously. We're Americans. So we assumed the man in charge of protecting the United States from COVID must be impressive and rational. We also assumed he was honest, but we were wrong. It soon became clear that Tony Fauci was just another sleazy federal bureaucrat, deeply political and often dishonest. More shocking, we then learned that Fauci himself was implicated in the very pandemic he'd been charged with fighting. Fauci supported the grotesque and dangerous experiments that appear to have made COVID possible. We came to these conclusions incrementally, spurred by evidence that accumulated over the course of a year. Tonight, we have the mother lode. Thanks to a Freedom of Information request from BuzzFeed, we have thousands of emails to and from Tony Fauci. Going back to early winter of 2020, collectively, they show that from the beginning, Fauci was worried the public might conclude that COVID originated at the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Why was Fauci concerned that Americans would conclude that? Possibly because Tony Fauci knew perfectly well he'd funded gain-of-function experiments at that same laboratory. He goes on to mention much of what I already said. He talks about everything that's happening, and then we'll move forward to the point of criminal inquiry. He says, he goes on to mention a lot of the news media and their lies. It's very long. Now we get to Rand Paul. This is the important part that needs to be brought up. So in March of last year, former Obama official Zeke Emanuel wrote to Fauci to ask a simple question, one that we've asked countless times. Are people who've recovered from COVID generally immune to reinfection? That applies to about 100 million Americans. Fauci's response, no evidence in this regard, but you would assume that there would be substantial immunity post-infection. Yes, you would assume that. We always have. And in fact, studies show it's true. People who've had COVID and recovered almost never get sick again from COVID. They don't need to be vaccinated. Yet to this day, Fauci has never admitted that in public. In his email to Zeke Emanuel, he admitted something else that's also now obvious. Surgical masks, the paper kind all of us wear, don't really work. They offer very little protection from COVID. In fact, at least one study shows they may accelerate the transmission of viruses. They're a form of make-believe, yet once again, while under oath in public, Fauci claimed precisely the opposite. Now, I'm not going to attest to Tucker Carlson's opinion. I want to stress, always talk with your doctor and make sure you're asking him specific questions about your medical health, because you don't take your opinions from Tucker. You've got to do the research yourself. Ask the questions of your doctor. But Rand Paul had an exchange with Dr. Fauci. Paul said, you're telling everybody to wear a mask, whether they've had an infection or a vaccine. What I'm saying is that they have immunity and everybody agrees they have immunity. What studies do you have that people that have had the vaccine or have had the infection are spreading the infection? If we're not spreading the infection, isn't it just theater? No, it's not. Paul said, if you've had a vaccine and you're wearing two masks, isn't that theater? No, that's not. Here we go again with the theater. Fauci says, let me just state for the record that masks are not theater. Masks are protective. And we asked Senator Paul, if they have immunity, they are theater. If you already have immunity, you're wearing a mask to give comfort to others. You're not wearing a mask because of any science. Now, that was, I believe, Paul was interjecting. Fauci said, I disagree. We go on and let's just read more. They mentioned that Bill Gates isn't a doctor, or Tucker does. Thousands of emails from and to Dr. Fauci reveal the weight that came with his role as a rare source of frank honesty. Yeah, that was CNN. By the way, it wasn't just CNN. No reporters asked about these emails at today's White House briefing. Not one question. But you shouldn't be surprised. Of course they didn't ask. Fauci's too big to question at that point. Oh my God, one Biden voter wrote back to him in March. Is there anything I can do for you besides being grateful? Wash my feet with your tears, Fauci may have responded. We can't say that he did respond that way for certain. We don't have his reply. We do know that in affluent neighborhoods throughout Washington, D.C., you can still see signs saying, "Thank you, Dr. Fauci." What does that tell you? It tells you that Tony Fauci is no longer a scientist, assuming he ever was. He's a figure of religious veneration. Jesus for people who don't believe in God. And they say this was adapted from Tucker Carlson's show. The question is, if Fauci lied about all this, is he under criminal investigation? Of course not. He's not going to go to jail. Politicians and high-ranking officials do not go to jail for this stuff. Will there be some kind of inquiry, some kind of anger? Perhaps, but likely nothing will happen. Let me show you the ramifications. Check out this tweet from Greg Price. CDC Director Robert Redfield received death threats from fellow scientists after suggesting in March COVID-19 could have come from the lab. This is the director of the CDC getting death threats because it was much more important to people to play politics than engage in science. In these screenshots, we see what it says. By spring of 2021, the debate over COVID-19's origins had become so noxious that death threats were flying in both directions. In a CNN interview on March 26, Dr. Redfield, the former CDC director, under Trump made a candid admission. "I am of the point of view that I still think the most likely etiology of the pathogen in Wuhan was from a laboratory, escaped." Redfield added that he believed the release was an accident, not an intentional act. In his view, nothing that happened since his first calls with Dr. Gao changed a simple fact. The WIV, the Wuhan lab, needed to be ruled out as a source, and it hadn't been. After the interview aired, death threats flooded his inbox. The vitriol came not just from strangers who thought he was being racially insensitive, but also from prominent scientists, some of whom used to be his friends. One said he should just wither and die. Peter Daszak was getting death threats too, some from QAnon conspirators. They say inside the government, meanwhile, the lab leak hypothesis had survived the transition from Trump to Biden. And now I think one of the most damning things we're getting out of all of this. We know the media underplayed this. They allowed Fauci to say nonsense. They didn't investigate. They didn't talk to sources. And if they did, maybe they would have uncovered. Maybe they could have reached out to various virologists and asked them. They didn't. Why? They hated Donald Trump. Here's what they say over at Vanity Fair. A can of worms. Since December 2019, the SARS-CoV-2 virus that caused COVID had infected more than 170 million people around the world and killed more than 3.5 million. To this day, we don't know how or why this novel coronavirus suddenly appeared in the human population. Answering that question is more than an academic pursuit. Without knowing where it came from, we can't be sure we're taking the right steps to prevent recurrence. And yet, in the wake of the Lancet statement and under the cloud of Donald Trump's toxic racism, which contributed to an alarming wave of anti-Asian violence in the U.S., one possible answer to this all-important question remained largely off limits until the spring of 2021. Behind closed doors, however, national security and public health experts and officials across a range of departments in the executive branch were locked in high-stakes battles over what could and couldn't be investigated and made public. They say a months-long Vanity Fair investigation, interviews with more than 40 people, and a review of hundreds of pages of U.S. government documents, including internal memos, meetings, minutes, and email correspondence, found that conflicts of interest stemming in part from large government grants supporting controversial virology research hampered the U.S. investigation into COVID's origin at every step. In one State Department meeting, officials seeking to demand transparency from the Chinese government say they were explicitly told by colleagues not to explore the Wuhan Institute of Virology's gain-of-function research because it would bring unwelcome attention to the U.S. government funding of it. In an internal memo obtained by Vanity Fair, Thomas DiNanno, former acting assistant secretary of State Department's Bureau of Arms Control, Verification and Compliance, wrote that staff from two bureaus, his own and the Bureau of International Security and Non-Proliferation, warned leaders within his bureau not to pursue an investigation into the origins of COVID-19 because it would open a can of worms if continued. There are reasons to doubt lab leak hypothesis. There is a long, well-documented history of natural spillovers. You get the point. What we're hearing: fear of China, anger at Donald Trump, and a failing media. That's why the people weren't properly informed. So, is Fauci under criminal investigation for lying? Probably not. They're going to find his exit. It will be him getting fired, but it will be called something fantastic, a promotion. Fauci is moving on to the private sector where he can do more and help the private companies come up with better solutions. That's what they'll do. They'll give him a PR escape. Meanwhile, we just need to sit back and realize The media hates you. Most of these companies, they prefer to report what makes their political agenda work or advance, not what's true. They will ignore research. They will not do investigations. They will just say, if it comes from our political opponents, we'll ignore it. Something interesting happened. This reporting came from the Washington Post and from BuzzFeed. It could not be easily dismissed. For whatever reason, they decided to report on it. Interestingly, the framing they did on these emails was very positive for Fauci. The emails reveal frank honesty and an attempt to keep things together. Actually, it was extremely damning. And because of that, because of these releases, they can't hide from it anymore. Something's changed. Maybe they knew the emails were coming and they're trying to preempt it. Maybe something else is coming. Maybe Fauci is bad at his job and he should have been fired a long time ago, and now he's lied under oath to Rand Paul. Maybe they will find his exit for him. We'll see. Personally, I think it is incredibly likely that Anthony Fauci leaves one way or another. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.